Dear children, this is a continuation of the lesson Coordination and Homeostasis in Man. In the previous video related to this, you learn about the brain, parts of the brain, and function of each part of the brain. In this video, you are learning about the spinal cord, autonomous nervous system, endocrine system, and homeostasis. What you see on the screen is the central nervous system. The central nervous system composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain and the spinal cord. You learn the brain has three main parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. The spinal cord starts from the medulla oblongata, and the spinal cord is a tubular structure starting from the medulla oblongata and runs through the vertebral column. That means the spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column. This encapsulate, or it is protected by the vertebral column. Tubular structure starting from the medulla oblongata inferiorly and runs through the vertebral column is the spinal cord. I told you in a previous lesson there are about 12 nerves connected to the brain and 31 pairs of nerves connected to the spinal cord. The nerves connected to the brain are known as cranial nerves, and the nerves connected to the spinal cord are known as spinal nerves. What you see here is the vertebral column. Vertebral column, the bony structure that protects the spinal cord. And in the previous video we discussed both the brain and spinal cord, that means the central nervous system, is protected by meningeal membranes. The brain as well as the spinal cord is protected by the meningeal membranes. What you see here is some vertebrae in the vertebral column and the spinal cord running through the vertebral column. It's a tubular structure. I told you 31 pairs of spinal nerves are connected to the spinal cord. Here one pair, another one here, another one here, right? 31 such pairs are connected to the spinal cord. Each spinal nerve composed of hundreds of neurons inside. If you take one spinal nerve, it contains hundreds of neurons, nerve cells, nerve fibers. Each spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots. Here one root and here another one. Each spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots. One such is known as the ventral root. Ventral root, your front side of the body. And the other root is known as dorsal root. Ventral root and dorsal root. And this one also connected to the spinal cord by two roots, the ventral root and the dorsal root. All the spinal nerves are connected to the spinal cord in that manner. The spinal nerves start symmetrically at either side of the spinal cord. The children, if you get a slice of your spinal cord, a thin slice of your spinal cord, it's like this. It's a cross section. These are the spinal nerves. It has been given here a pair of spinal nerves. I told you the spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots, and these the dorsal root and here the ventral root. You can easily identify the dorsal root because there's a small swelling in the dorsal root. Here, there's a small swelling. We call it as dorsal root ganglion. Dorsal root ganglion. With the help of this dorsal root ganglion, you can identify the dorsal root. In this cross section of the spinal cord, you can identify two zones, the gray matter and the white matter. In the brain, also you came to see that it composed of gray matter and white matter. In the brain, white matter inside, gray matter outside. But in the spinal cord, it is other way around. Gray matter inside, in this dark zone, white matter outside. Gray matter inside, the inner part, and white matter outside. White matter composed of axons of the neurons, gray matter composed of cell bodies. Gray matter composed of cell bodies. At the center of the spinal cord, there's a small canal. We call it as the central canal. Central canal. At the children, let's study how the neurons or the nerve fibers are connected with this spinal cord. Right. Here a cross section of the spinal cord. Here the gray matter and here the white matter. Here the central canal, and these are pair of spinal nerves. Each spinal nerve is connected to the spinal cord by two roots, the dorsal root and ventral root. The dorsal root is having a swelling. We call it as the dorsal root ganglion. Dorsal root ganglion. What does it consist of, this neuron or this nerve? In this part of the spinal nerve, it contains both motor neurons and sensory neuron. Both kinds of neurons are found at this part of the nerve. We call it as the mixed peripheral nerve. It's a spinal nerve. Mixed peripheral nerve. But after that, dividing into two roots, the dorsal root and the ventral root, in the dorsal root it contains only the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons. In the ventral root it contains only the motor neurons. Motor neurons, right? Inside the ganglions, dorsal root ganglion, you find the cell bodies of the sensory neuron. Cell bodies of the sensory neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion. When a certain stimulus is received by the receptor, that impulse is carried to the spinal cord through the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron. Then the sensory neuron transmits the impulse to the interneuron. Interneuron is inside the spinal cord. Interneuron get the impulse and transmit it to the motor neuron. Motor neuron carry the impulse to the effector. This effector may be a muscle or a gland. Muscle or a gland. This is the nerve path that some responses are originated when you receive an impulse or a stimulus. You receive the impulse is carried or transmitted to the central nervous system, here the spinal cord, to the sensory neuron, then it is transmitted to the interneuron. Interneuron transmits the impulse to the motor neuron carries the impulse to the muscle or gland, the effector. Right. I told you the cell bodies of the sensory neurons are found in the dorsal root ganglions here. For the children, you have to learn very important term to describe the function of the spinal cord. Reflex actions. Reflex actions. You know, your body needs some immediate reactions for certain stimuli. Otherwise, your body get damaged and sometimes you would die if you don't have such immediate responses. When your hand touch on a hot object, without your knowledge you take the hand away. When a sharp object prick into your leg, without your knowledge you raise your leg. When something coming into your eye, without your knowledge you blink your eye. Even a small child, infant, close the eye when something comes into the eye. All these are reflex actions. They are involuntary actions. They are done without your conscious mind. They are happening automatically. Right? What is a reflex action? Reflex action. An immediate, automatic response to stimulus is called reflex action. An immediate, automatic response to stimulus is called reflex action. They are very important, they are very essential. Can you remember the part of the brain these reflex actions are controlled? Sneezing, vomiting, like immediate responses are even controlled by your medulla oblongata. But some of the reflex actions are controlled by your spinal cord. This is how it happens. Have a look at this video clip. When a person is met with an accident, once he is brought to the hospital, the doctors check whether the person's spinal cord is damaged or whether the person's spinal cord is properly working. For that, they are doing a small test. We call it as knee jerk test. Knee jerk test. If the person is okay to sit, he is asked to sit like this, and with a small rubber hammer, the doctor hits on his leg just below the knee. Without the person's conscious mind or conscious knowledge, the leg moves forward if the spinal cord is not damaged. That means this reflex action occurs. This is a reflex action, knee jerk. We'll see how it happens. When you beat just closer to the knee of your leg, that stimulus is received by the skin, and that stimulus is transmitted to the spinal cord by the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron. Here the dorsal root, here the cell body. Then sensory neuron transmit the impulse to the interneuron. Then the interneuron transmit the impulse to the muscle of the leg. Then the muscle contract and your leg moves forward. This is a reflex action. We call it as the knee jerk. This is a reflex action. Some of the reflex actions are controlled by a spinal cord. We call them as spinal reflexes or the spinal reflex actions. And some of the reflex actions are controlled by your brain. When something comes into your eye, you close your eyelid without your knowledge. That's a cranial reflex action. Reflex actions may occur through your spinal cord. We call them as spinal reflexes. And if it occurs through the brain, intermediation of the brain, we call it as cranial reflex actions. Cranial reflex actions, right. What are the examples for the spinal reflexes? Moving the hand away when it is contact with the hot surface or a hot object. Lifting the leg when you step on a thorn or a sharp object. Examples for the cranial reflexes: sneezing, salivation when you see something tasty, blinking of eyelids. They are doing without your conscious knowledge, conscious mind. The automatic, the cranial reflexes. Right. Reflex arc. The reflex actions are performed by a nerve path. You have already studied it. This is the nerve path that the reflex actions are originated. This nerve path that the reflex actions are done or reflex actions are maintained is known as reflex arc. Reflex arc is the functional unit of the nervous system. Is the functional unit of the nervous system, reflex arc. Is the nerve path taken by impulses to bring about reflex action. The nerve path taken by the impulses or the signals or the messages to bring about a reflex action is called reflex arc. What you see here is the reflex arc. The receptor receives the impulse. That is the skin. It carries to the spinal cord by the sensory neuron to the dorsal root here. Then it is transmitted to the interneuron. Interneuron transmits the signal to the motor neuron. Motor neuron carry the impulse to the effector. It is muscle or a gland. This nerve path is called the reflex arc. The nerve path that the reflex actions are brought about is known as reflex arc. Right. This is also reflex arc. You can easily identify the dorsal root and ventral root. The cell bodies of the sensory neurons are inside the dorsal root ganglion. This is how the knee jerk occurs. Now it is through the motor neuron. The muscle contracts. The leg moves forward. The effector is the muscle. Skin receives the impulse. The sensory neuron carries the impulse to the spinal cord. It is given to the interneuron. From the interneuron to the motor neuron. This is the reflex arc, and here the reflex action. Knee jerk. The children, if you are asked to write the nerve path or the reflex arc for a certain stimulus, you have to write it like this. Stimulus received by the receptor in the sensory organ, then to the sensory neuron, then to the interneuron in the central nervous system, then to the motor neuron, then effector, and effector originate the response. Right. Here the reflex arc. Reflex arc. Now, dear children, we have come to the end of the lesson regarding the spinal cord. The next part of the lesson you are learning about the peripheral nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Peripheral nervous system means the rest of the nervous system except the central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system composed of 31 pairs of spinal nerves and 12 pairs of cranial nerves. They are spreading out of the central nervous system. Spreading out of the central nervous system. This is the central nervous system, and the rest of the nervous system is peripheral nervous system. Right. In this lesson in grade 11, you are learning about autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is a part of peripheral nervous system. The autonomic nervous system coordinates involuntary activities in the body. The activities done without your conscious mind. Autonomic nervous system. In the autonomic nervous system, there are very large number of peripheral nerves. This autonomic nervous system control and regulate the activities of the internal organs of your body without any conscious recognition. The activities of your stomach, activities of your lungs, activities of your salivary glands, like number of internal organs are controlled without any conscious recognition by your autonomous nervous system. This autonomous nervous system is controlled and coordinated by your hypothalamus of the brain and medulla oblongata. Now you'll have a question, I know that. What is hypothalamus? Hypothalamus is a part of your brain at the lower side, of the brain. The hypothalamus controls most of the autonomic activities. And medulla oblongata also controls autonomic activities. The coordination centers of the autonomous nervous systems are hypothalamus and medulla oblongata. Your autonomous nervous system composed of two parts. One such is sympathetic nervous system and the other one is parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system composed of two parts as sympathetic and parasympathetic. These two parts of the autonomic nervous system perform opposite action to each other. Opposite actions to each other. For example, sympathetic nervous system activates some functions of organs and the parasympathetic nervous system deactivate or it is getting into the normal condition by the parasympathetic nervous system. If I elaborate it furthermore, by one system, sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, these type of activities are controlled. The sympathetic system increase the size of the pupil in your eye. When you are getting afraid or when you are facing to a new challenge or some sudden situations, your pupil becomes large, increase the size of the pupil. That is because of sympathetic nervous system. It happens automatically, you know. Then the parasympathetic nervous system reduce the size of pupil. That's why I told you. These two sympathetic and parasympathetic systems control activities opposite to each other. Sympathetic system inhibit secretion of saliva. Your mouth becomes dry because of inhibition of secretion of saliva. Then the parasympathetic stimulate the secretion of saliva. That means it is getting back to normal. Sympathetic system increase the heartbeat rate. You know, there are some situations, in certain situations, your heartbeat increases. If it doesn't happen continuously, then you will die. Because of the activities of the parasympathetic system, the heartbeat reduces and getting back to normal. Sympathetic nervous system increase the rate of aeration of lungs, rate of respiration like. The parasympathetic getting that back to normal or decrease the rate of aeration of lungs. And sympathetic nervous system affect on your digestive system and decrease the peristalsis movement. As the peristalsis movement decreases, you know, the pushing of food through the digestive system decreases. The digestion slows down. Then parasympathetic nervous system increases the peristalsis of your digestive. Right. This is how the sympathetic and parasympathetic autonomous nervous systems control the autonomous activities in your body. You see the same diagram here. Dear children, we have come to the end of lesson regarding spinal cord and peripheral nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. In the next part of our lesson, we will be discussing about the chemical coordination and homeostasis. In my next video, I hope to discuss about this chemical coordination and homeostasis. Goodbye, children.